I'm not in the thing, Dave.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, there we go.
Good morning, everyone. Today is 20 October, the year 2003. I'm Harry Ziegler, a volunteer at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in California. Part of our mission is to record and preserve the history of World War II. In conjunction with the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in our country's military conflicts. Today I'm here at the museum along with fellow volunteer Dave Thompson. We have the honor and privilege of interviewing Sid Weinstein, who was in the Navy during World War II. So nice to have you here, Sid.
Thank you.
Now please, if you would, spell your full name and last name for us.
My full name is Sidney Weinstein, Sidney Weinstein.
And Sid, could you tell us where and when you were born?
I was born in Buffalo, New York in November the 22nd, 1909.
And do you know a little bit about the genealogy of your parents and grandparents?
Well, my parents came from Poland. My father came over first, and he didn't like the country at the time because there were very little religious activity for him here. And so he wrote my mother and said, I'm coming back to Poland because I don't like the environment here, the religious environment. She said, well, if you're coming here, you're not going to find anyone because we are coming to the United States. We're not going to stay in this bigoted country any longer. And so they arrived here.
Now, what did your grandparents do you know?
Well, my father was a shoemaker, and in those days, someone in the trade, they went through an apprentice program, which he did in London, and he was a very skilled shoemaker. As a matter of fact, in those days, he made shoes for the vaudeville entertainers, and he was considered very competent in that area.
And so when he came from Poland, he came to New York?
No, he came to Buffalo.
Oh, that's right, you told me that. And then?
And he resided there until, for a few years, and then they moved to Rochester, which is the town that I spent most of my early years in.
Now, your grandmothers and grandfathers, where were they?
Well, they were living in Rochester. My grandfather was, well, he had a shoe store, he sold shoes. And my grandmother didn't live too long after she came here. So they both passed away at a relatively early age.
Now, growing up in Rochester, can you tell me a little bit what that was like, what your home was like?
Well, Rochester was a very good town. It was fairly small by today's standards. I think the population then was about 250,000. And we lived in a mixed neighborhood, mostly Italians, and everything got along beautifully then. And it was a good town to grow up in.
Now, did you speak Polish in your family?
No. My parents spoke Yiddish, but we always spoke English to them. They would speak in Yiddish, and we would reply in English. So.
But you understood Yiddish?
But we understood it, yes.
Can you still understand it?
To a certain extent.
Is there a difference in that language where if you were, say, from Israel, the Yiddish in Israel would be different from the Yiddish, or is all the same?
Quite a lot different. As a matter of fact, Yiddish is really, you're pardon the expression, a bastard of the Germanic language. As a matter of fact, when I was in Germany and heard the natives talking in German, I understood them fairly well because the language is almost similar.
To Yiddish. So
Yes.
its root center in
Its
German.
root center is Germanic.
Germanic. Now, what, were there other siblings in the family?
Oh yes, I had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. We were a family of 7 children.
How were you in the lineup?
I was in the middle. We had a celebration on our 90th birthday, and my brother, who is now the only remaining member of that family, got up and said that I was a middle child. I was born in the center, and he said normally that is affects their self-esteem. He said his remark was, "Do we see any evidence of that?" And evidently the answer was no. I never had trouble with that.
So what was your house like? How many rooms did you have?
Well, we lived in a 3-bedroom home. My parents occupied one. My brother occupied another. My sisters occupied the third. And I was stuck in a little room up in the 2nd floor by myself, which I really enjoyed.
Now, were the streets paved or were they dirt or what?
Oh yes, the streets were paved. They had originally cobblestones. When I was a youngster, I'd go to sleep with the sound of hoofbeats on the street. And the horses were the common means of transportation.
Were there grocery stores and bakeries and things?
Oh yes, there were all of those.
So if your mother wanted you to go to the store, you could go a block or 2 away?
Oh yes, yes.
And can you remember whether the stores, were they run by Italians or what generally was the
Well, the stores that, most of them in that neighborhood, there were Italian fruit stores. The Italians are very good at producing fruit, and the other stores were run by Jewish people, so it was no problem. It was a very well-developed city.
Now, did your dad, how did he get involved with New York from Rochester?
From New York, well, when he came in on the ship, he first went to Buffalo, and he had relatives that helped bring him over. So he started really in Buffalo, and then later on, they all moved to Rochester.
And in making the shoes for the vaudeville people, how did they find out about him? Do you know?
I don't know that, but he worked for this very top shoe outfit. In those days, shoe repair was in the top bracket of activity. And he worked for them, I don't know, 20 years.
Do you know where and how he met your mother?
Well, I know he met her where they lived, and he was very attracted to her.
And her background is also Polish?
Oh, yes.
So on her family's side, were her parents in the U.S. or were they still over in Poland?
Oh, no, they were all there.
They were all there. And how did you get around in those days? How did you get from where you were to, let's say you wanted to go someplace to play stickball or something? How did you?
Oh, we got around. The transportation system was good, streetcars, and I got my first car when I was about 17.
What kind of car would that have been?
It was a Ford coupe, and I recall we paid $75 for it.
Used, huh?
And I had as many as 10 people in it at one time.
Were the trolleys horse-drawn or were they electric?
They were electric.
Did you have electric lights in your home?
Oh, yes.
Indoor plumbing and...
Well, we changed from gas. Originally, we had gas lighting, but then electricity came in, and my parents were very modernly inclined, and they went along with any new gadget that came along. We had a washing machine that worked on water power. Later on, of course, we got one that worked on electricity.
Now, what is water power?
Well, the pressure of the water turned the thing that activated the washing machine.
Oh, darn. And your entertainment then, and was it the radio?
No, we had no radio.
You had no radio.
As a matter of fact, books were our only outward resource, and at an early age I was an extremely fast reader, and I loved to read. I read as many as 2 books in one night, one day, and I enjoyed the classics, so I felt my education came from the books I read, not so much schooling.
Did you go to a Jewish school?
Oh no, we went to public
Public
schools.
schools.
But I never graduated high school. I think the principal once said either I leave or he does, something like that.
Why was that? You were smarter than he was?
No, wasn't as smart, but I was a handful.
And are your brothers and sisters going to the same schools?
Oh yes, my brothers were very good at I had one brother that was almost in the genius category, became a top engineer. But I never took to school. I looked out the window and I was thinking of riding a horse on the plain, chasing Indians and that sort of thing.
So when would you have graduated from high school?
I didn't graduate.
No, I mean would have. When would that magic day have been?
Oh,
Year?
I suppose 32,
1932.
something like that.
So you're old enough, and your family is obviously marching right into the Depression.
Oh yes, the Depression was one of the things that encouraged me to join the service. Although I always had a desire for adventure, and I really joined the Navy because I was searching for adventure. And I think that one of the failures of the recruiting is that they don't stress that enough with the young people, that adventure in the service is something desirable.
Now, earlier in your younger life, there was a flu epidemic that went around the country. Can you remember much about that?
I remember that my mother they hung sacks of camphor around our necks, thinking that would ward off this flu, but many, many people died from it.
Can you remember, was your family, did they escape? Or?
Yes, we all escaped the flu epidemic.
And so why did you decide to go into the Navy?
Again, adventure.
I mean, why did you pick the Navy over other services?
Well, I don't know. I originally thought of joining the cavalry at Fort Sheridan because I enjoyed horses, and I look forward to that. I'm glad I didn't. I ended up being in a tank. But I had a friend that joined the Navy, and so I joined also.
Well, having been a good reader and not going through high school, what did you have odd jobs or things you did prior to going in? Did you work for deliver magazines or do anything?
Oh, I did many things. I was a cab driver, lied about my age, so I was a cab driver at a very early age. And I worked at one time delivering on a truck. I drove a big truck. And I also sold newspapers when I was very young, 7 or 8 years old.
Did you have to donate any of that money to the family, or could you keep it?
Oh, sure. We all supported the family. When I sold newspapers, I was perhaps 8 years old, which was against the law, of course, but we ignored that. I'd bring home 40 cents and give it to my mother,
And can you,
and she would hold up a loaf of bread and say, "He got this for us."
can you remember what the food was like in your family, what you ate the most of, how the cooking went?
Well, my mother was a marvelous cook. We never were hungry. And matter of fact, in the old tradition of those people, giving food was an expression of love, so they showered everyone with food that they liked.
As the Depression started to deepen, did people come to your house for food, or you'd feed them off your kitchen? Or
Well, my mother always gave food to people that were in distress, always.
that seemed to be a very common thing.
Yeah. We had to have people come to our door. She never sent anyone away without a large package of food.
I don't know of anyone who didn't do that.
Yeah.
Frankly, it was just.
It was a good attitude in those days.
Did you have the horse deliveries of vegetables and fruit right through your neighborhood? Guys selling fruit, or guys selling meat or things?
Oh yes, we had some tradespeople, milkmen. They delivered coal in the winter and milk in the summer. We had certain deliveries, but most of us did our shopping at markets.
Did you have a furnace then that supplied heat to all the rooms?
Yes, heating was not a problem as I recall.
You didn't have a stove or something?
We had a furnace in the basement.
And how was the stove in the kitchen? Was it a coal stove?
Well, originally it was, but later on it was gas or electric.
And for entertainment, I mean, was there a movie house that you could go to, or?
Yes, there was movies, and every Saturday I'd go down to, my brothers and I would go down to visit an aunt of ours who was being courted by someone, and I would go in and hang around, intruding until she finally would come up with a quarter. Then we'd all run off to the movie house. That quarter took care of it.
So where do you go into the Navy? When you first get orders to, where is your basic training?
Well, I enlisted and went to the Great Lakes for training. In those days, the drill instructors hadn't read any book on proper behavior. They're pretty rough. They're very rough. And I always marveled at how rigorous that training was and the purpose of it. And finally, I realized what it was. When you got to a point where you didn't care whether you lived or died, then you became strong, and nothing could bother you. And I remember one time, my drill instructor came at me. He said, "Smile, damn you." And I refused, and he came toward me with his saber, which he liked to use to hit people with. And I just lowered my hand on the rifle, and he knew if he came any closer, he was going to be met by a rifle butt. And he turned around and walked away. But the training was good. It made you tough. It made you strong.
And how long would that have lasted? Can you remember?
I don't know, 6 months or perhaps longer.
And then you finish your basic training, and what happens?
Well, then I became a corpsman, so I was sent to the Hospital Corps Training School.
How would you pick to be a corpsman? How'd that come about?
Oh, I just applied for it.
Oh, okay, you didn't have to take tests or anything?
No. And they sent me to the school in San Diego, and the training was fantastic. In a very short time, they trained you. I used to be able to recount the name of every bone in the body, and they really gave you very thorough training in a very short, comparatively short time.
Was this at Balboa by chance?
Yes, Balboa, the Naval Hospital there.
When you're going from Great Lakes, are you doing all it to San Diego?
To San Diego.
Is it all on the train?
Yes, on a train.
Remember much about those train trips?
Oh, yeah. I remember going through the desert. I don't know, the train was going at about 50 miles an hour. And dust just covered the seat. You get up for a minute or so and come back, your seat was covered with dust. It was a very long, arduous trip.
Did they feed you on the way? How did you get fed?
Oh, yeah. I guess food was never a problem.
I mean, did you get off the train and go eat something?
No, no.
They had a mess hall there on the train?
They had food service
Was
on
it
the
pretty much
train.
all military people on the train?
I don't recall. No. No, we were just, we weren't that many.
And the training then, when you're finished as a corpsman, you're sent to where?
I went to the hospital for, and I served there for about a year or so, and then I was ordered to a ship.
So we're about 1934 now?
No, it was earlier. It was about, I went aboard the ship in 1932.
Do you remember the name of the ship?
How could I forget it? My favorite ship, the USS Salt Lake City, a heavy cruiser that had sunk more ships than any ship in naval history. Of course, I didn't serve on her during the war, but she was a fantastic ship, wonderful crew. The guys were like a band of brothers. They'd lay down their life for you. The officers were so-so. The executive officer was bad, and the food was horrible. The way they cooked in those days, anyone who was unsuited for anything else was made a cook. And for our omelet in the morning, they would take a case of eggs, shells and all, dump it into a mixer with a bag of cornstarch to expand it. It was during the Depression, you know. And then dump the whole mess into a pan of bacon grease. So it came to the table green, full of shells, and greasy. And for 4 years after that, I couldn't eat scrambled eggs.
Now, where did the ship have the combat that it got its name, reputation?
Well, it was in the Philippines.
In 1898 in the Spanish-American War?
Oh, no, no. She was commissioned in the 30s.
Oh, okay, she was a new ship then.
Oh, brand new, 10,000 cruisers. They were great.
And so where did in the 30s, she got her combat in World War II then?
Yeah, but when I went aboard her, she was based in the Los Angeles Harbor. That was the home base for the fleet. And the bay there was filled with ships, battleships, carriers, cruisers, destroyers. And that was our base. This ship was was a great ship, but when visitors came aboard in the harbor, she had a tendency to roll a lot, which they couldn't seem to overcome. And we had people visiting us get seasick in the harbor.
Well, what would be an average day for you as a corpsman down in sickbay?
Well, we had our routine, our cleaning, our taking care of patients. And on Fridays, of course, you got ready for inspection on Saturday. My detail, I had 3 portholes, and they had brass fittings. And I would spend about 2 hours on each one to get rid of the crud that accumulated when we went to sea, to clean them up so that they would sparkle.
And what type of medical treatment would you provide, you personally?
Well, we did many things that only doctors are allowed to do now. We gave intravenous, gave shots, all kind of shots, and we did a lot of the treatment that, as I say, they finally came out an order before I left the ship that doctors had to do a lot of these things that we were doing. But we were, I'll have to say, we were more competent than the doctors they had, because a lot of them were sent to sea because the best doctors were always sent to the hospitals.
So how many cruises did you make on the Salt Lake City?
Oh, gee, countless number.
Can you remember
We
some
spent
of
very little time in port. We went to Hawaii, went up north. I remember we went up to Everett, Washington for July 4th celebration. The skipper anchored the ship about 7 miles offshore because he didn't want to get in too close danger to the ship, and the visitors complained about the long boat ride. And then they terminated Liberty at 6 o'clock. Well, most of us had been at sea for weeks, and so we were anxious not to go back that early. However, in Everett at that time, it was a very small town, mostly occupied by Swedes. And we learned of one fellow, he got and found a room to stay in, rented a room. The next morning, the proprietor banged on the door and said, "Boys, wake up, time to get up." He opened the door, 20 sailors walked out.
And when you went on Liberty, besides drinking a few beers and running around chasing the girls, what else happened?
What else is there to do? Fighting. Part of our recreation was fighting. And when we fought, there was no malice in it, just an expression of energy. So we'd start, these big fights would start, and it was a type of recreation.
Besides Hawaii and Seattle, did you get to any foreign ports like Philippines, or
No,
pretty much up and down the coast in U.S. territories? And
not on that ship, but I was on a battleship, the USS Wyoming. And this ship was great. It was like a tourist ship. We would pick up the midshipmen in Maryland, and we go to Europe in the summer. And then in the winter, we go to the Caribbean. We take the Marines down to the Caribbean. And it was just like a tour. We really enjoyed that.
so did you go from the Salt Lake to that ship? Or?
Oh, no. From the Salt Lake, I went out of the service at the end of, at the expiration of my enlistment. And I had a friend who was been a cowboy. He had folks that had a huge ranch in Texas, and he said to me, "Sid, why don't we get an outfit and we'll work ranches and ride up from the Mexican to the Canadian border, working ranches and that." And I was all for it, but then my folks were writing saying, "Come home, we got a place for you to work, we need you," and so on. So I decided to give that up and go home. Well, I went home.
What year would this have been, Sid?
34.
19.
And I was given a job of delivering shoes. Well,
from your uncles?
from my dad and my brother then had a shoe store because the depression, he got fired from his job, lost everything. He owned some apartments and everything, lost everything. As a matter of fact, I was in the service making $54 a month. And for 3 years, I sent $40 a month home with an allotment to my folks. And my mother said that money kept them going. That $40 meant a lot because the average salary in those days was about $25 a week.
Now, are your sisters still living at home?
They were then, yeah, but of course,
How many kids were still at home then, said that were living off of that?
My sisters, I think, were married then. My brother was married. I think there were only about 2 or 3 children at home at that time. But so I worked at this job, and it wasn't very interesting. And then I went to a movie, and I saw a newsreel. And there was the Pacific Fleet steaming down the Hudson River. I spotted my ship. I said, boy, that's it. Went back in.
And Hitler is just starting to rattle the swords in Europe. Are you?
In 33.
Is your family getting feedback on the Nationalist Socialists in Germany and what's going on yet? Is that starting to
No.
your community ring any bells?
Well, when I was in Europe, and we were in Europe on this ship in 36, I think, and they were getting ready for war. In London, they were getting bomb shelters built and everything. People seemed to realize that the war was coming soon. And we were in France, and we were pulling out of Le Havre. So we lined the deck, and the pier was crowded with a tremendous crowd of people watching us leave. So we manned the rail. They played the Star-Spangled Banner, and we all stood at attention saluting. And then we played the Marseillaise, their national anthem. And I looked over at the dock, and here are all these people standing, paying no attention to the sound of their national hymn. And I saw one man. He walked over to 2 men standing there, yanked the hats off their heads, and then he stood at attention till the song was finished, and then he threw it down at their feet. And as we left, I said to myself, these people are not going to fight. And they didn't.
What ship, when you said it was your ship, what ship is this now that you're on?
USS Wyoming, a battleship.
And compared to other ships, was it a bigger dispensary, or, I mean, where in the classes of battleships, was she one of the new ones and the biggest ones, or?
No, she was an old ship. Matter of fact, she got retired and put in. I don't know how much she participated in during the war, but she was an out-of-date vessel.
Now, for entertainment aboard ship, had movies hit the ships yet where they could?
Yeah, we did have movies.
And what would be the normal setup? Do you on a fantail and set up a screen, or how would they do that?
Oh, about midsection, it set up a screen.
And what rank are you now, having had a 3 or 4 year enlistment? Now you're back in.
Well, when I enlisted, it was during the Depression. It took me 5 years to make 3rd class petty officer. And at that time, when it opened up, there were only 5 vacancies. So you had to really be in the top to get in, which I managed. Matter of fact, things were so bad they required officers to take 30 days leave without pay. That's how bad it was. And everything was very tight, money-wise, for this service.
How'd they bunk you on these battleships?
Well, when I first went aboard the Salt Lake, we slept in hammocks. And I liked that because when the ship rolled, you know, it just swayed and was very comfortable. Later on, they converted all the ships to bunks, and they were not as easy to sleep in rough weather.
And your food, did it get better in the?
Oh yeah, later on the Navy set up cooks and bakers schools and sent people to school, and they became, but food was such an important thing aboard ship. As a matter of fact, we classified ships according to the food they served.
And how was that classification going?
Well, she's a good feeder and she isn't, you know. I remember we went aboard the Houston for a while, and they served food that was great. I'll never forget their Christmas dinner. The city of Houston sent up their fruitcakes, you know, and
Really nice.
really great.
Are your responsibilities going then along with your rank, getting people working underneath you and in charge and telling your corpsman what to do, or how's that?
Oh, well, you're in charge, you're in charge. You're supposed to be a leader, you lead.
But what rank would be the senior enlisted man in a dispensary aboard a battleship?
Well, each rank carries its own authority. If you're a first-class petty officer, you have, as a matter of fact, when the war started, I was a first-class petty officer, and I had a run-in with my executive officer. We had men posted at the hatches, first aid men, in case someone got injured. So the executive officer came by. He said, well, these men aren't doing anything, they're just sitting there. He says, so he ordered them to go get coffee for the crew, you know. And they reported it to me, and I said, you guys stand fast. You're not leaving your post. So I spoke to the executive officer. I said, sir, these men are there in case something happens, and you never know when an accident's going to occur. Could happen while you've ordered them to get coffee. I said, so I've ordered them to stand fast. And he says, but I ordered them to get the coffee. I said, sir, the Navy regulations state such and such. His reply was blankety blank the regulation. But I didn't move my men, and he didn't pursue it any further.
That's good. Now, is the fleet, is there a sense of war coming maybe with Japan yet? Are you guys training more, doing more live fire and that type of stuff?
Well, I was in Iceland with the Marines prior to the war.
How'd that get about now?
Well, I was on duty with the Marine Corps, the 1st Marine Division, being trained, and then we got orders to ship out. The war was going on in Europe. We thought we were going to go to Martinique, which is a French possession, and we thought that we'd probably go in and take it because the United States wouldn't want enemy forces to use it. Instead, we ended up in Iceland, in winter gear. And we knew the war was coming on. Meanwhile, the States is very isolationist. They tried to pass a law to extend our enlistment, and the Congress refused to do it. And there were all kinds of strikes going on, and we were very upset by it because we knew that war was coming. As a matter of fact, our destroyers were hunting Nazi subs because they were sinking so much commercial shipping going to England to keep them alive. And so Roosevelt had ordered our ships to attack them, and we were waging an undeclared war against the Germans. So we knew it was just a matter of time, and we were very upset about the war not being seen as coming by the American people. As a matter of fact, I wrote a poem about expressing that concern. And of course, at that time I thought, well, things aren't too good out here, but I'm sure in the Pacific they're really on their toes. Was I ever disappointed?
Well, let me backtrack a little bit for time purposes. When did you leave the battleship and go to a Marine division as a corpsman?
Well, let's see, from the battleship, the memory is not as facile as it used to be.
No, fake it.
Sounds pretty.
Well, I think I went to the Marine Corps. I went with the Marines. I spent about 12 years with the Marines.
Did you ask for that, or were you just assigned to?
No, they just assigned me.
Because it sounded like the corpsmen were moved around a lot, that you were...
Well, Navy, they did move you around a lot.
So where did you report to get with the 1st Marine Division? Where were they?
Well, they were based in San Diego at the Marine base.
So that's where you...
1st Marine Division, right. We went there, and I liked the Marine Corps. They have a different attitude than the Navy. You know, the Navy is a gentleman's outfit, and mind your manners. Whenever I was assigned to the Marines, the first thing I did was raise hell about something and pull rank, because that's what they like. And that makes them respect you. If you don't do that, they'll ride roughshod over you.
So why did the Marines go from San Diego all the way up to Greenland or
Iceland?
To Iceland.
We went up there because Roosevelt arranged, as a matter of fact, when we went up there, we stopped at Argentia, Newfoundland, and Roosevelt and Churchill were meeting on a ship. I think that's when they started this Lend-Lease and all this other. But Roosevelt saw very clearly that we were going to have to fight Hitler. So he was moving us in that direction. We went up to Iceland to relieve the British garrison that was occupying Iceland so they could go home and fight, because they were getting the devil knocked out of them. And when we got there, we subsisted on English World I rations, corned beef, canned beef.
Little bully boy?
They served it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Never got so sick of anything in all my life.
Now, what year would this have been again?
That was 1941.
So you're there.
I was there 8 months.
So were you in Iceland when the war started?
Oh, no. My enlistment had expired. They kept me 2 months beyond my enlistment, and I wasn't going to re-enlist there. So my enlistment expired, and I was sent back to the States. I was the first one to return to San Diego from that outfit, and everyone was very anxious to hear about the people that had gone over there. Because they had a lot of relatives, family, and everyone else there in San Diego. So I had a friend, an editor in the San Diego paper, and I gave him a lot of information about what was going on there. And
What there is Europe?
And Iceland.
And Iceland. Greenland? Iceland.
Iceland,
Yeah.
no, not Greenland.
No, Iceland. You're Keflavik or...
You know, Iceland is one of the oldest republics, I guess, It's 1,000 years old. And anyways, they were all very anxious to hear the news about it, so I was able to provide a pretty good summary of what was going on.
Now, are you still reading a lot all this time while you're in the service, or as you're reading?
Oh, yeah. I always read a lot.
He reads both papers from cover to
I'm a very fast reader. I always enjoyed reading. I've always said that anyone that likes to read will never be lonely.
And so you get back, and do you go to your home in Rochester after your discharge, or?
Oh no, I was sent to a receiving ship waiting orders. Then I was ordered to the USS Xylan, which is a troop attack transport. That was up in Bremerton, being fitted out, and it was a converted ship from the President line. And shortly after I got there, December the 7th occurred.
Are you back in the Navy now?
Oh yeah.
So you were.
I went from the Marines and back to the States, and I requested to be returned to my Marine outfit. Instead, they sent me to a ship. And I had friends there who were the same rate as myself. They said, well, gee, Sid requested the Marines and got a ship. We don't want the Marines. So they all requested ships. They all got Marines. After the war, one of them confronted me and said, you so-and-so, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have spent the day more in the foxhole.
So, somewhere or other, you make your way off the ship back to the Marines then. Is that correct?
Well, no. Once I was assigned to that ship, I didn't do Marine duty again till after the war.
So, your Marine duty as a corpsman then was only in Iceland?
Iceland.
And so the rest of the war, you were a corpsman aboard a battleship the whole time?
No. I was aboard this attack transport.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And I was on her until we got damaged and sent back to the States.
Now, how'd you get damaged? What was that?
We were bombed
And where is the ship?
at Guadalcanal. The ship took off and went to, we joined the fleet and we were heading towards Guadalcanal. But the Midway battle was just starting or underway, and so they hold us up in Samoa. We laid in Samoa for about a month, and it was very boring. Seaweed grew on the ship. It looked like a garden growing there. Finally, the Midway battle was completed successfully, and then we were ordered out to head towards Guadalcanal to attack her.
Now, what's aboard your ship? Troops or troops?
Yeah, we had a Marine outfit with all their equipment. We had 2,000 troops with all their equipment on a ship. It was a big ship. And we headed out. We attacked, I think it was April the 7th, I'm not sure, that we attacked. Our target was Tulagi, which is an island up there in the Guadalcanal group. And we pulled alongside this island. Now, we didn't know if they were armed with big guns or not. We had very little intelligence on the whole setup there. And so we pulled in very close to the shore, and dawn was just breaking, and they hoisted our battle flag, the American flag, because up to that time we were going unidentified as far as our identity. We hoisted our battle flag. We pulled alongside the shore there, and I was looking over at the beach there, wondering if they were going to open fire on us. We didn't know what they had. And as I watched, someone living on the beach there on shore turned on their light, and at that same time a bomb struck it from one of our planes and blew it up. And I thought, that guy must have really thought it was quite a short circuit. When he turned the light on, the bomb hit.
So it was one of our own birds that bombed you?
Oh, sure.
Uh-huh.
We went in. Now, we were told that we had 3 days to execute our landings, but we encountered stiff resistance. And our men never had run into an enemy that was willing to let 4 guys go by and shoot the 5th one, even though they were going to be shot immediately. And they'd never run into that kind of adversary before. And it really disturbed them. It set them. At any rate, we were unable to make the designated landing. And as I say, we had 3 days, and we were told that the carriers protecting us might have to pull out in 3 days, and that the Japanese would launch a counterattack. So I watched, and I couldn't believe my eyes. What do you think they were loading into the boats for the landing? Office equipment. And then they horsed around, they found a Japanese landing boat, they pulled it alongside, and they fooled around with that. They acted as though they were in San Diego Harbor. I couldn't believe it. And I wondered why, if they couldn't make their landing, they didn't load the soldiers. I thought one bomb hit. We then started to be subjected to many attacks. We had one flight of planes come in. They came in so low that we were standing there firing at them with our 45s. They blew up most of them, but one of them hit up one of our ships, and it got sunk. And I kept thinking, they're fooling around loading office equipment. One bomb hit on the ship could destroy the ship and the 2,000 men aboard that we traveled all this distance to get here. But finally, we got word that a Japanese fleet was on its way and shells were starting to come in. And then they dumped all this equipment from the boat. They start loading ammunition and emergency supplies and the Marines. And then they just took them with the boats, and we left them all there, and we hauled out because we were under attack.
Now, this is all at Tulagi, or is this over at the Guadalcanal?
It was all of Guadalcanal. We all had to get out of there because, and as I say, you know, this is a tendency I saw time and again. When there was a cessation of battle violence, men would start acting like they were on vacation somewhere. They would lose their security awareness. I never could understand that.
Is that something medically you ever addressed again?
No, but I think it's characteristic of most military people. I don't know.
So you bang out at Guadalcanal, do you go back there then and tell?
Oh yeah, we went back there periodically. We pick up troops at Espiritu Santos, we go back in. Each time we went in, we got attacked. It was a real hot spot. But the thing that finally took us out of the doldrums is they relieved the admiral running the thing, and they appointed Bull Halsey. The minute that guy took over, the whole picture changed. We now became not victims, but aggressors, warriors. And one man did it. I mean, it was amazing how his personality could infect, and of course he immediately launched attacks. So he was great for us.
Well, were you able then basically to get your stuff offloaded eventually? Or did you end up still with supplies?
Well, we kept going in there, and we finally got hit by one of their bombs. The ship almost got sunk, put a big hole in us. We were able to save the ship, and we went down to Espiritu Santos where they did a little more patchwork, and then we went to back to the States to be repaired. To do that, we had to go way south to avoid any enemy encounters.
Now, what was it like in sickbay with these attacks on your ship and getting hit? What are you getting in there for people to be treated?
Well, of course, we lost some people there. We got killed in that attack. We had a burial at sea. We buried them at sea. But when we came out of there, we took aboard a load of Japanese prisoners in one of our trips. We brought in troops, took out wounded and Japanese prisoners. And we had a complement of about 8 doctors because we were prepared to handle casualties. When we left there, and they brought all of these Japanese prisoners, and they took them down below deck, and I had a certain responsibility for them. They took them below deck, and they were all milling around, and the Marine guard takes his automatic weapon, lays it on a tabletop there. The Japanese all milling around it, and he walks off, and he's telling the Japanese, do this, do that. And I pointed, I said, wait a minute, your weapon's on that table, they could grab it. He says, don't worry about them. Once they give up, that's it. And that was true. Once they surrendered, they were through with it. There was no attempt to escape or fight back or anything.
Were they disgraced for surrendering, is that it?
Oh yeah, it's against their Bushido, their code.
Now, on the burial, did you write up any services?
I wrote a poem about it. I witnessed it, and it was very...
Pretty emotional for those. Is that poem one of them that you gave?
Yes.
And so you take the ship back to where, for Pearl Harbor maybe, for?
Oh no, well the ship went back to, I think we went into Long Beach Dry Dock there.
You got all the way back to the mainland.
But I want to say this about the Japanese. They had a lot of wounded. And so the doctor said to me, we got too many American casualties to take care of. You take care of all the Japanese casualties. So I worked on them, operated on them, did everything. I took about 18 bullets out of one guy. He wanted to kill himself. I said, Doshita, you know, why? He said, Itai, itai, means pain, pain. But they had we had some difficulty with them. Their food wasn't right for them, so I went to the skipper and I told him, I says, Captain, we're feeding these people the wrong stuff. They have to have rice. We're giving them macaroni and cheese and spaghetti and all this heavy stuff, and they can't handle it. So then we cooked up bushels of rice, and they did fine on that.
So where did you end up taking the prisoners?
We took them to New Zealand. I'll never forget New Zealand because the heat was unbearable up around Guadalcanal. Heat and humidity. Everything rusted. Everything, paper clips turned to rust. And the only way you could sleep, I had a grass mat. I lay down on the deck on a mattress, and that was the only way you could sleep. It was, of course, they had no air conditioning in those days on the ship. There was no way to stay cool. And it was a real problem. We got to New Zealand, it was cool, they had fresh milk. Boy, that was really a treat. And the New Zealand people were like family. They loved us. They kept talking about that they were going to belong to America after the war. Really great people.
Brother-in-law was there with the 2nd Marine Division. He said he remembered steak and eggs was 45 cents in New Zealand.
Yeah, it was great. Wonderful country, lovely, lovely people.
And how long were you there then?
Well, we, as I say, we kept running back and forth to Guadalcanal. And then finally, when we got hit and patched up, we headed for the States. We went into Long Beach Harbor, dry dock there. I think we were the first ship in it. And then I was ordered to the hospital. By that time, I had rank, and I was made the maintenance officer of Balboa Park, which was an adjunct to the hospital, and we had thousands of casualties, mostly with what was this? They had malaria and these other tropical conditions they picked up there. And you know, it's interesting, when we went into Guadalcanal the first time, I assembled a landing party, corpsmen, so when they reported on deck, they were all wearing these Red Cross brassards on their arms. So I said to them, take them off, stick them in your pocket. Well, the doctors heard that, and they raised hell with me. They said, what are you doing? I said, I don't want these guys shot. They said, Japan is a member of the Geneva Convention. I says, look, you know the Geneva Convention. I know it. Those guys over there don't know it, or if they did know it, they don't care about it. Well, they insisted that they put them back on. So I had to order they do that. But I told them, I said, when you get on the beach, you take mud and cover it. Well, one of the first sights they saw when they landed was a doctor lying on the beach with the Red Cross brassards on each arm and a bullet hole here, because they targeted first aid people. So much for the Geneva Convention.
So when you said you were a maintenance officer for Balboa Park, that's kind of a strange place for a corpsman to go, isn't it?
No, it's attached to the hospital. And as a medical service corps officer.
Uh-huh. So it's
and I was responsible for renovating these buildings and getting them turned into hospital wards. And I didn't make a move without consulting with a fellow that was a superintendent of the parks. He had an office there. I remember I wanted to build a staircase to the 2nd floor that I was shaping up, but there was a straggly bush there, type of a tree, that needed to be removed in order to build a staircase. But I consulted the superintendent. I said, we have to remove that to put that up. He came down, he looked at it, and I said, well, what's the problem? He said, there are only 3 of these trees in the whole United States. He says, you can't cut it. I had to work around it.
Now, what year are we talking about?
That was probably 43, because I did 1 year there, then I was ordered to an aircraft carrier.
And are you single still? Have you met a lady of your life yet? Or?
No, I got married there to my first wife, and got married, and shortly after I was married, I got orders to head to sea.
Now, was she a local San Diego girl? Or
Yes, she was.
born and raised there? Or,
Yes.
and parents were there also? And,
Oh, yes.
and what nationality was your wife? You remember?
Mixed. Irish, I don't know, Indian, whatever, I don't know.
So, do you have any children before you shove off, or get her pregnant or anything? Or
Well, we had one on the way when I left.
so you go to a carrier now?
Yes,
Which one is that?
the Monterey. It was a CVL, which is a light carrier, not the big one, but she was fast. So we operated with the main fleet, the 3rd and 5th Fleet.
So, what did you do? Head out to the Philippines? And
Well, we were operating off Okinawa and all through there. We were involved with a lot of these attacks constantly.
can you remember what kind of aircraft were on the ship?
Yeah, they were the fighter and the
Corsairs?
torpedo.
Were they Corsairs or Hellcats or
Yeah, Hellcats and the torpedo
the
plane.
TBMs? Or,
Yeah.
I flew off to Monterey. I remember.
Yeah.
Now, this tour on the Monterey. So you're out there with the kamikazes and
Oh, yes. Well, the kamikazes didn't come in until later. We engaged in a lot of action, and remember on Okinawa we had attacked there, and then towards nightfall we were attacked by Japanese torpedo bombers, and they fired a torpedo at us. It missed us, but it caught a cruiser that was supposed to be protecting us. And she got hit and disabled. So we went on, and another cruiser came up alongside. And the captain on that cruiser was a friend of the captain on our ship. He knew him. He says, "Don't worry about a thing. I'm here to take care of you. You can relax." A little while later, another attack, another torpedo, and he got hit. It was out of action. But we saw a lot of action, and there's a movie that shows a plane. It went over our flight deck, the whole length of our flight deck, about 5 feet above the flight deck, and then crashed on the other side. The pilot must have been dead. And that was caught on this movie. But we saw a lot of action, but the worst thing happened to us was a typhoon. We had, Halsey loved typhoons. We had taken one, we followed it in, and when the typhoon left, the Japanese defenses were all shot, so we had a field day. So he tried to do that. And we got orders to head towards Okinawa, and the weatherman on my ship, he went to the skipper and he says, "Captain," he said, "there isn't one typhoon, there are two of them. Sometimes they go in twins." He says, "There's a big one behind this little one in front of it." He said, "If we follow our course, we're going to go right in the center of it." And the captain says, Halsey knows what he's doing. He begged him to send a message to Halsey telling him what he had found. So the captain finally agreed. He sent a message, "Interrogative, your course such and such," questioning the course. The answer came back affirmative. Well, we hit the center of this typhoon. It wrecked us. You couldn't stand, you couldn't walk, you had to just hang on. and we lost 3 destroyers that capsized in it. My battle station was aft, and our sick bay where I was at was forward. In order to get to my battle station, I had to go topside because our hangar deck was on fire. Planes that got smashed up and the residual gasoline caught fire. And the whole hangar deck was in flame. So I got on topside, and in order to transverse that deck back to the after section, I had to leap and grab struts, in the deck that they tie the planes down. I had to leap, grab on, hold on till the ship leveled off and leap to the next one. We lost 3 men who slid across the deck, hit the island, slid back into the ocean, couldn't stop themselves. The ship was like that. So I got back aft, and we had a lot of casualties because the fire, the gasoline.
Keep talking. So we go ahead.
Explosions would pick up people and hurl them against bulkheads, injuring them.
Can you remember the date of that typhoon?
Not offhand, but I think it was in '33. And I tried to treat these guys that were injured. So I had them put on a table and tied down, and then I had 2 men on each side of me holding me while I tried to give intravenous. The ship rolled, and we all ended up banged up against the wall on the deck, You couldn't stand. So finally, I decided the best thing to do is just put them in bunks, tie them down, and cover them, keep them warm. And that turned out to be the best treatment of all. And they all came out. But then we got orders to abandon ship because the fire was getting out of hand. And I was really in a state because I didn't know, what do I do if I abandon ship? Do I leave these guys? Or do I try to save them? And to save them...
You went down to pick up the dead down below on that ladder.
Oh, that was something else. That was on the other ship. Anyways, so I was debating. I thought, my God, what am I going to have to do here? Abandon these men and save myself, or try to get them up to that? Fortunately, we had a navigator on our ship, and he told the captain, "Captain, if you want to save your ship, you'll lay to." Lay to means you don't maintain any headway, because when we made headway, we were hitting these waves. He agreed, and so that saved us. So then they were able to get the fire under control, and didn't have to abandon ship, thank God. So after that, we were wrecked, and all of the carriers, their flight decks were draped down over their bows. We were ordered back to the States for repairs. Well, we got back to the States, they fixed us up, and then we were ordered back out to sea again, back to the Orient. And we pulled into Pearl Harbor, and we tied up behind the Franklin. Now, we'd had no experiences yet with kamikazes, but the Franklin had. And the Franklin was a ship that everything that happened to us happened to her. Her flight deck had been brought down. She was a carrier, a big carrier. And she'd gone ahead of us to Bremen and got fixed up and sent back out. or she was going to go back out there. But she had been hit by a kamikaze, and that ship was just a floating hunk of junk. It was so burnt out and so ruined. And we tied up behind her, and we said, that's what happens. That's the kamikazes doing, and we're going out there to meet them. Believe me, morale was way down. But anyways, we left. We went out there, and we were involved with the kamikazes, but they never were able to hurt us.
So do you go to Okinawa? Is that where you?
Yeah. And you know, it was a startling thing. You know, they'd always reported casualties of the military, the soldiers. Then they came out with a casualty report for the Navy. It was gruesome. People were shocked because we lost so many people out there and so many ships. But I remember this one incident. We're all sitting below deck, you know, in battle condition. And I had a philosophy that I'd taken from Lin Yu Tang, who said that if you are not involved in the action, your mind should be at peace. And I used to say that to myself, because I say, you're not firing the gun, and you're not steering the ship, and you're not flying the plane. You have nothing to do with it. Sit back, relax. So I'm sitting back relaxing, and we had an announcer who was a chaplain on the bridge, and he would report to us over a loudspeaker what was going on. So those of us below deck sitting in the darkness could know. So he said, oh, the bogies are coming in. They're on the outer screen. The outer screen is firing at them. The destroyers have opened fire. Now the cruisers, they're coming in. They're heading in. They're heading towards us. They're coming in. And then he lets out a scream. And then dead silence. Those of us below deck, we're all starting to climb under tables. Nothing happened. I don't know what happened with this guy. He let out the scream, maybe something came close or something, but that was really something. But anyways, we went through the war, got through it successfully without getting any real damage. Towards the end there, Japan had surrendered. So, you know, they dropped a bomb and they announced Japan had surrendered.
Did the word atomic bomb mean anything to you?
Oh yeah, we read about it. I mean, they put out a news thing, told all about it, and so we were alerted to it. But they said, yeah, Japan surrendered, and we're listening on the radio, and they're celebrating in San Francisco. We're under attack. The Japanese pilots who refused to accept that and were attacking us. So Halsey comes on and he says, we're at peace, but we're under attack. Shoot them down in a friendly fashion. And that was the word there. But anyways, the war was over, so I thought, well, we were ready to go into Tokyo Harbor. And they assembled the fleet. There were American ships, British ships. There was a flotilla out there that was reached out to the horizon of all these combat ships. Well, we didn't know if the Japs were going to pull some kind of a trick. So we had been at sea, and so everything was pretty much used up. So they ordered the ships to be rearmed in case we were involved in some kind of a trick here. And so this ammunition ship was going around to all the ships, loading them up with ammunition. And we were the last stop on the run. It was starting to get sunset. Everybody was rushing. The ammunition ship came alongside. I was on the forecastle watching, and they were hauling bombs aboard. But because it was so late, instead of taking the bombs and sending them down below to be stored safely, they just put them out on deck. So the deck was covered with all these bombs they were loading on there. All at once, from nowhere, a huge tidal wave came on us. There must have been an underwater earthquake or something somewhere. The ship rolled one way and then rolled the other way, and the bombs start rolling all over. I looked over at the ammunition ship. They cut the lines with an axe and took off. By the grace of God, nothing exploded. If one bomb had gone off, that whole ship would have gone up in smoke. And there were bombs all over. We had a few guys that were injured. One fellow had a broken leg, another broken arm, where the bombs had. But there were bombs in passageways and in hallways and all over the ship. So all I could think of, I went through this whole damn war without a scratch, and now I'm going to get blown up. But fortunately, nothing happened.
That's amazing. So you were there for the peace signing then with?
Oh yeah, we went into Tokyo Harbor, and then we went home. And they sent us. Our home port was on the West Coast, but they decided for PR purpose to bring us around to New York. So we went through the Panama Canal. And there, in the Panama Canal, the guys really broke loose, you know. These pilots had all this money, you know, and the place was wild with booze and women. I was sitting at a table with couple of the pilots, and this gal, this hostess, I guess, sitting with us. And this place is called the Blue something, the Blue Moon or something. This gal was drinking a drink, a blue liquid, and there was a waiter standing there. He'd pour the drink, she'd gulp it down, set down a glass, he'd pour another, and each time, I don't know, $50. And this pilot, you know, he's happy. I said, wait a minute. I told the waiter, you get out of here. I told the gal to get out, she wouldn't move. I said to the pilot, look, what's going on? What are you allowing us? He says, oh, it's fine, man. So I got up and left. But they really took off. So we got around in New York, and they made a big PR thing of it, returning from the war, et cetera, et cetera.
And with peacetime on you, does your wife come to New York with the babies? Or?
Well, she came. I had orders to Philadelphia, and then they changed, so I had them all come from back east, and they stayed with my relatives, my family up in Rochester. And then they changed my orders to the West Coast. And following the war, I was ordered to about 3 different stations. Each time I went there, they closed them up. Went to another, they closed them up. But we finally got settled somewhere.
So there's PCS, and you do all these.
Oh yeah.
And then they move you. So where?
They move you, and in those days they moved your furniture by train, and when the stuff was delivered to you, it was all in pieces, you know.
So where do you finally end up for a permanent duty station?
Well, let's see. as I said, I went, well, we went to Mare Island. That was one that I went to. From there, from Mare Island, well, I went to Corona. From Corona, I went to Patuxent Naval Air Test Center. There I met most of the guys that became riders in the
Astronaut program.
astronauts.
Yeah.
Came from there. A great guy. Carpenter was a personal friend of mine, and the one from Ohio, the senator,
John Glenn.
John Glenn.
Yeah.
I knew him very well, and his lovely wife.
Annie.
These guys were, I would say, exceptional human beings. They were tops in everything. Their behavior and everything, their intelligence. They really are superhuman people.
Well, now at Patuxent, how many years do you have in the Navy?
30.
So you retire from Patuxent?
Oh no. From Patuxent, I went with the Marines. No, from Patuxent, I went to where did I go?
Well, we can skip it. Where did you join up with the Marines then?
Well, first I went to Saipan. I was with military government in Saipan. Oh, I went to Alameda from Patuxent to Alameda, and then to Saipan, where I was attached to military government. And that was quite an enjoyable experience in Saipan.
Now, what rank have you achieved by the time you go there to the...
Well, I was a lieutenant commander then.
So at some point you go into the officer corps.
Oh, yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, when I left as Island, I was made a ensign. I was commissioned an ensign when I left as Island. That was in 42, I guess. And then I gradually promoted up to lieutenant commander.
And is this all in the field of medicine?
Medical administration.
You're in medical administration?
Right. They sent me to a school, Bethesda, for 1 year. They had a very intensive course. And covered many, many subjects.
Where would that school have been?
At Bethesda, Maryland, Bethesda Medical Center. And they really gave me a fantastic education. Then we went to Saipan, say with military government, and later on I joined the 3rd Marine Division in Okinawa, the Marines.
So what year are we talking?
That was 56, I think.
So where were you during the Korean conflict?
I was at the Corona Naval Hospital, and I'm not sure of my...
But you didn't get involved in going to Korea at all?
You know, one of the things that I noted when I was at the Corona Naval Hospital, we had these lady visitors, you know, that were out to do good for the servicemen. And they came into this ward, the surgical ward, and here are all of these servicemen and casts and that hanging up in there. And they say, oh, these poor wounded veterans, these poor wounded servicemen. I didn't tell them that most of these casualties were from automobile accidents.
So you get back, you go to Saipan, and you're with the administration of the island.
Yeah.
So you're in charge of some kind of their health and
Oh, yeah. Well, we had all these little islands, and some of them were really idle, beautiful islands, black sand. And the natives, you know, the living was so easy that it was really incredible. They were so rich in resources as far as living, food, and so on. And so we'd visit them and we'd go through all the things. We'd get all the husbands back to their wives and straighten out the illnesses and other things. And then at the end, they would have a big feast in your honor. And they would serve you all these delicious foods, snakes and whatnot, lizard. But anyways, it's all part of the situation.
And after Saipan, then what happened?
Well, then I ended up with the Marines, the 3rd Marine Division, and on the staff of General Shoup.
And where is this located?
This was in Okinawa. First we were in Japan. From Japan we went to Okinawa.
What year were you in Japan?
Well, that was with the division. It was,
With the Marines?
yeah, it was around 56, 57, somewhere
Do you
around.
remember where the Marines were? Were they Fuji camp or?
No, because I came on them just after just when they were being transferred. But we were at Camp Courtney in Okinawa. It was headquarter battalion.
And your job with the Marines, at your rank now,
I was the medical administrative officer
for the division,
for the division.
with Shoup. So did you get to chat with Shoup much?
Chat with who?
With the general there?
Oh yeah, he was my favorite, and I think he liked me very much. We we always had a Monday conference, you know, and all the heads of the department would meet with the general and review everything. And so I told him at one of these meetings, I says, General, I'd like to have general order such and such canceled. This order required a medical inspection of the living quarters of any serviceman who married a local. They try to discourage it as much as possible. The few that got through had to go through all kinds of things. And we were required to examine their living quarters to make sure that they were met proper sanitary requirements. So I said, General, I'd like to have that order canceled. He says, why? We have to protect the health of our men. I said, sir, if you'll stand at the main gate at 5 o'clock, you'll see a large number of our Marines headed out, and they would disappear into these villages. I said, and then if you're at the main gate at 6 o'clock in the morning, you'll see them all coming back. I said, now nobody's checking their quarters. I said, but the one guy who happens to marry a local, he has to be subject to this inspection. General said, cancel the order. But he was not only a wonderful military man, you know, he was Medal of Honor winner, and he was really great. When they attacked, what was the island where they got so much? Iwo Jima.
Yeah.
He figured out the number of Japanese that they had to contend with by counting the toilets or something that they used. He was so smart. But he was not only a tremendous military officer, but he was an intellectual and a very rigorous disciplinarian. Because he was really tops.
Now, how long did that tour last for you?
About 2 years. During that time, I learned to speak and write and read Japanese, which I now seem to have forgotten.
And how did you go to class or school?
I went to school. When you talk about the Japanese, People don't understand that their military was as cruel to them as they were to the American prisoners. And he told me, my Japanese instructor, during the war he was walking down the Ginza with his girlfriend, and he happened to pass an officer and failed to see him, and so failed to salute him. The officer called him back, stood him at attention, and in front of all these pedestrians and his girlfriend, beat him to the ground with his stick. And that's the kind of behavior they were subjected by the military.
So, your tour on Okinawa and with the Marines eventually comes to an end. Then what happens?
Then I was ordered to the States for retirement.
And you've got how many years now?
30.
And your rank is?
Lieutenant Commander.
So you've gone from seaman to lieutenant commander in 30 years.
Yeah,
So
it's a long road, but it took a war to do it, or a couple of wars.
It's quite an accomplishment.
But you know, when I reported, I was assigned to the receiving station in San Diego, the destroyer base there. And I had experience with this facility when my family and I were quartered there, and I had to take my kids over to the dispensary for treatment or something. And then I left, I thought, boy, if I'm ever ordered back to this place, I'm going to straighten them out. Well, I was ordered there. And let me tell you, in a very short time, the fur flew. I got that place so it ran right. I told these people working there, you treat everyone as though they're an admiral. I said, everyone.
Now, how many children do you have now?
I have 4 children, 18 grandchildren, 13 great-grandchildren, or 14, last count.
But when you're retiring, you have 4 children already?
I had 4 children, yes.
And so you retire. Now, you obviously had a flair for literature and writing and doing things like that. So when you retire, how do you select where you're going to go with your life?
Well, I don't believe in retirement per se. I keep busy. I thought when I retired I'd have a lot of free time. I find I don't have. And I keep myself very occupied. And I've written, since retiring, I've written 2 books. And I've done a number of other things that...
Well, when you, with 30 years, let's see, you were 17 or 18 when you went in?
19.
19? So you're only 50 years old.
Well, when I joined the service, I lied about my age. I was only 7 years old at the time.
Well, you could have fooled me. Now, so where do you go then after you retire? Where do you take your family and head to?
Well, we lived in La Jolla. We lived in Los Angeles. We lived in Temecula. I bought a market in Temecula
That was when we were married.
and built homes there.
That was when we were married.
Yeah.
You didn't live with the family in Temecula.
And I live in San Diego.
So what you separated from your first wife, or how?
No, she's passed away.
She passed away. And when you're moving around, what are you doing for a living? What are you?
Well, when I retired, I always wanted to be a teacher, but I had 4 children, and we were financially not that well off, so I decided to try to earn some money, so I went into real estate. And I went in with a very large corporation in San Diego, and finally achieved a position of vice president with them, and spent about 15 years in real estate. I've always said 30 years for glory, 15 years for money.
So You have a real estate career, you leave that, and what do you do?
Well, we bought a market
It's fruit type market? Or
at Temecula. It was a full-time market.
Mm-hmm.
Temecula is a very interesting town. When we went there, it was really a cowboy town. It's been one of the early stagecoach cities.
You bought it in 77, though. That's
We bought in 77. And then I built some homes. I built a few homes. And
When did you start writing for doing your books and things like that?
well, I've always done a little writing. Not as much as I should have.
I said, you have such talent, why don't you write?
So well, let me get back up a little bit. When you remarry then, at some point? Is that
Yes.
Temecula where do you meet your second wife?
I met her at Murrieta Hot Springs, which was a resort, which my real estate company owned. They also owned the Dunes Hotel in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
I met my wife at Murrieta Hot Springs.
And so you get married, and you're together then doing the market in Temecula?
Oh, yes.
We had it together.
Yeah, she was great, and they had Indians there. They loved her. They all loved her.
Oh, they loved you too. One drunken one. They can't hear me there, can they?
Well, they might a little, don't worry about it.
The one drunken worker came in at 2 o'clock in the morning. We lived in back of the market in a trailer, and he said, I have no way of getting back to my, he lived
On the reservation.
the reservation. So that was at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, he got out of bed, he got dressed, he drove her home. They didn't know what to do for him.
Well, this fella, I used him when he was sober. He was the most wonderful worker.
Wow.
And when he drank, he was a monster. And one time I got into a little argument with someone, and when the guy walked away, this fella turned to me. He said, "You want me to kill him?" He was serious. He had 7 brothers, each one worse than the other, and they've been charged with murder and everything else. You know, in Temecula at that time, they couldn't have a bar because of the Indians.
Well, how long did you own the market then?
About 2 years, was
The
it?
doctor told him he's got to sell it.
2 years.
Or it was just, let's see, how old are you at this point with the,
I was in my 80s, wasn't I? 70s,
No,
80s.
we're in the 70s. We were in our 70s.
I was working like a kid, you know, boxes and everything.
it's okay,
And
so,
finally I got a little heart condition,
A little.
and I was told to quit.
okay, so we still have almost 20 years, or at least 15 years between then and now, after you sell the market. So what do you fill in with this next 15 years or so?
We sold it in 79. He just retired. I don't know. We just.
You travel and
We did some traveling, and but now she refuses to fly, so that's out. I'm still driving. Attended reunions. We attended one from my first ship to Salt Lake City in Laughlin here a little while back, and I drove there
Just last month. At the
last month. Yeah.
and so have you been writing and doing poems and things since?
Yes. Yes.
So are you involved with literary groups and things like
Right. I attended a group of poets who write modern poetry. So I was asked by a friend to visit with them, and I did. And I said, you know, I don't understand this modern poetry. I said, you know, a famous poet once said that writing poems that don't rhyme is like playing tennis without a net. And they all went, boo, hoo, hoo. Then I said, I've always been very influenced by Shakespeare. And this one fellow who is a professor at the university here, he said, Shakespeare, he's been dead for so many 100 years. I said, well, I'm sure people were quoting him long after they've forgotten all about this modern poetry fad.
Yeah.
So they didn't take to me too well.
Now, during World War II, something you wrote ended up being produced as part of the war effort. What was that?
Well, that was part of the war when I wrote this poem protesting the strikes that were going on. And they made it into a poster which was widely circulated.
But
I refused to have my name on it because I'm not keen on publicity.
But it was something that was hung all over the country. And
Oh, yes, and
I used to stare at it. May I just read that little short poem? And if our lines should form then break because of things you failed to make, the extra tank, the ship or plane for which we waited all in vain, will you then come and take the blame?
and the supplies.
And the supplies which never came, will you then come and take the blame? For we, not you, will pay the cost of battles you, not me, have lost. That
Marvelous.
was in every defense factory and in every essential industry. I used to stare at it.
Kate Smith recited it over the radio.
And you have written, you said, 2 books. What other things have been accredited to you? Do you do anything?
Well, I wrote, I was with the Fleet Training Group, and I think I admitted that in my count of my different duties. I was with the Fleet Training Group. This was during the Korean War. Before a ship would go out to Korea combat waters, they had to pass an inspection. So the Fleet Training Group had the responsibility of checking out all aspects of the ship's performance to see if they were combat ready. And then following the exercise, we would all meet and each one of us would give us their critique. Well, if we gave them a failing mark, it meant they had to go back for more training. I had the responsibility of the medical abilities of the crew, and when I put them through their various tests, I found they were very deficient in their ability to handle casualties. And I felt the entire training program was wrong. So I came up with a program where treating casualties would be like changing the tire on a car. To change a tire on a car, you don't have to know about the motor. And so to treat casualties, you don't have to know about the type of blood or symptoms or anything but what is evident. And so I wrote this program, and it was published, and the Navy adopted it because it proved that in 1 hour training they could do what was not done well in 18 programs and 18 lessons.
Clear your throat, yeah.
Now, do you need water?
Yeah, I could use it.
Can I go for it?
Please. Let's talk, just kind of, we're getting pretty close to where we can end this. Your children now, where are they?
Well, I've got a son
Pardon me.
who has a security company in Los Angeles.
He has children?
Oh yes, he has 3 children.
Okay.
And I have a daughter who is 65. She's just gotten her a PhD at Santa Barbara, and she's now teaching school there, and she has 4 children. I have another daughter who lives in Israel that has 7 children. I have another son who lives in Las Vegas and working in security there.
So, you said you have how many grandchildren now?
18,
And great-grand? Any great-grandchildren yet?
14.
14. And on your next birthday, how old will you be?
Well, we'll be 94 in about 4 weeks, 3 weeks.
And your wife is also the same age?
Same day, same month, same year. Only they take her from my daughter.
She's lovely. Now, can you recite still that last poem that Ann just, can you recite that yourself? Because I'll get her to put it on the tape when she comes back.
Well, let's see. If our lines should form and break because of things you failed to make, the extra ship or tank or plane, and the supplies that never came, will you then come and take the blame? For we, not you, will pay the cost of battles you, not we, have lost.
And that was the last paragraph of a poem, and that paragraph ended up as a poster which was placed all over the country, wasn't it?
Yes, I wrote this poem as a protest to the strikes that were interfering with our nation's preparation for a war that was just on the horizon.
And going back to some of your historical roots, as you were the services any different towards Jewish people while you were there? Could you feel any animosity over that?
Sentences.
Let me tell you, I came from a community that rarely had any men go into the service, and everyone told me, you get in the Navy, they'll kill you because they don't like Jews. Well, I got into the Navy, and believe me, these shipmates of mine were closer than brothers. Let me give you an example. I reported aboard this ship, the Salt Lake City, and I'd come from shore duty, so I went aboard, stashed my gear, went ashore, and then was going back to the ship. It was during the day. I was sitting at the boat landing cafe, and the sailor sitting next to me said, what ship you off of? And I told him the Salt Lake City, and he said, that's strange, I haven't seen you on it before. I said, well, I'm just reporting aboard. He said, where are you headed for? I said, I'm going back to the ship. We're leaving on a cruise tomorrow, and I want to get myself ready. He said, what's the matter? You broke? Because they couldn't understand going back to the ship. Boy, you have to when you had so little shore duty or shore liberty. And I said, no, that's not it. I just want to get back there. He says, here. And he hauled out and threw $20 at me. Now, he didn't know me from Adam. The fact that I was off his ship was enough for him. I, of course, refused the $20, but that was a week's wages in those days.
At least.
But the only time that I had that question come up, on 2 occasions, as an enlisted man, I had chief petty officers
Dear,
who
you have to stop scratching yourself.
who behaved badly, And so I challenged them. And each time I put my fist under their nose. And they put me on report for insubordination. And each time the skipper asked me, took me aside and said, "You think he treats you that way because you're Jewish?" And I said, "No, sir." I said, "I'm always willing to carry out a military order given in a military man, not when you're blankety blank blank blank." I said, "He treats everyone that way." And each time they made the chief petty officer apologize. But I never ran into any discrimination in my career.